Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. I'm so excited for today's topic. It's going to be a really good beginner cooking episode for people, especially if you're someone who doesn't know how to cook. We're going to go over a lot of basic steps, talk about meal prepping, and yeah, it should be a good one.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I also just started cooking a lot more again and taking over some of that responsibility. So I feel fresh back in the game now to talk about a lot of this. So yeah, we're gonna talk about cooking basics of cooking. We're also gonna talk about cookware, and some things to kind of think about and be mindful of in the cooking meal prepping process from a toxicity kind of standpoint. We're talking about meal prepping, building meals, recipes. So even if you feel like I am a decent cook, there's still a lot of value in this episode. And we do, especially from clients, we get a lot of questions all the time about, what should my meals look like? What should all of these things look like? How do I build this plan? And by the way, we also do have a ton of resources on this, and we will share one in the show notes here, and we'll talk about that more when we get to it. But yeah, so we're gonna talk all about this. We're also gonna talk about why we don't do actual meal plans for people because one, that's not in our scope of practice. Two, full disclosure, I used to do them as a personal trainer, as do many personal trainers, just by the way. And no, they are not qualified to do so. No, I was not qualified to do so, and I did it anyways. And they never work. Literally a 0% chance of working long term. So this episode is going to be a lot of education about just how do we cook, how do we build meals, how do we nourish ourselves and those around us, whoever we're living with, from a cleaner living, holistic health perspective. Let's just dive right in, and let's start with meal planning. What do we how do we meal plan? How do we recommend meal planning? What are maybe some different ways that we can start meal planning, meal prepping, and what does this kind of look like?
Yeah. So as a basic starting point, especially for someone who's maybe not used to being in the kitchen, we kind of want to focus on what should a meal look like, especially when we're trying to eat whole foods. So we want to make sure that we have a protein source, a veggie source, and then some type of starch. That's the easiest blueprint that we can have when we're getting in the kitchen and trying to start making our own food. And honestly, it's the easiest thing as opposed to, I feel like some people try and start with recipes, which is a great thing, especially if you don't know how to cook, but we want to keep it really, really simple because a lot of recipes, they can be intimidating. They use tons of different ingredients. So really just starting with a protein, a starch, and a veggie. So maybe that looks like, chicken, a potato, and some broccoli or whatnot. Having that is your base point is going to help guide you. And once you get comfortable with kind of what that should look like, then we can start adding in different things. And this can be really, really easy to do. I'm talking get a bag of frozen veggies to make it easier on yourself, cooking everything in the oven at one time. Just keeping this as simple as possible is going to make it feel way less intimidating on you.
Yeah, and as much as I don't love the bodybuilding world and space, I love meal planning, meal prepping from a bodybuilding standpoint. And that's because I focus on literally exactly what you just said. And back in the day, and obviously I do things a little bit different now, but I'd make two proteins for the week, and this was mostly for dinners and or lunches. So I'd have two or three proteins, usually some sort of chicken something. And I will say, chicken, by the way, if you've never had chicken thighs taste way better than chicken breast. If you're not familiar, so I highly recommend some chicken thighs. If you're not like, if you're like chicken breast is so boring and like it has no flavor to it. One, we're gonna talk about that. Two, try some chicken thighs because those are yummy. I would do like some rice, like white rice cooked in bone broth, or like some sweet potatoes, like, and usually have one kind of starch. I also, like, for me, I don't get bored eating the same thing for most of the time. So, I do recognize that and I know that is not the case for everyone. And then I'd have like two or three veggies as well. And I'd usually do like something green, like a little greens mix. I love like some kale, spinach, colored greens, just anything green and leafy. I'm not the biggest fan of that stuff raw, but I do like to cook it in some olive oil in a pan, or like with some duck fat or, like a really like good, yummy fat, like way better than plain, just by the way. And yeah, I mean, that would make it so easy because then you can just kind of like pick and choose what you want for the meal and you have everything already done, laid out. I would used to measure and weigh and that kind of stuff on my food, but you don't have to do that piece of it. But just doing it this way makes it so easy. And then if you're doing it this way too, and not doing like especially a full on recipe or multiple recipes, this can go really quick, especially if you like oven, if you have a grill or a crock pot or an Instapot, like a combination of two of those, man, does that go a really long way and can be super, super easy to meal prep all of this stuff.
Yeah, and once you have like these couple basics, like say you were to do like a chicken in some type of red meat, like a steak or something, it's nice because you can swap like what you're having throughout the week. Like you can mix and match the proteins and the veggies and the starches, and that kind of gives you the option to, change it up. Maybe you have like a couple like dressings or seasonings that you're using on each of these, like just to give it a little bit of variety. That can make it really easy as well. And you mentioned the grill, using the oven. If you have kitchen tools here, like a rice cooker, a meat thermometer, something to help cut up the veggies a little bit easier. I think you mentioned the Instant Pot, a crock pot. Any of these tools, especially if you're new to cooking, can make your life so much easier. It's just going to help save you time. It's going to make the process feel easier as you get used to things. And you can also do larger, like batch and prep cooking when we have some of these tools. So again, if you're someone starting out, like just trying to keep it as simple as possible, as easy on yourself is going to be the way to go. And sometimes that looks like what I had mentioned in the beginning. So kind of, half prepping here. So maybe we're choosing to make all the protein sources ourselves, and we're buying pre-cut veggies that are already frozen instead of buying like a whole veggie that we need to clean and cut and do all of these things. Like, and maybe we buy a pre-made like salad dressing or something. Until you get more familiar with how to do these things on your own, that can make it like so much easier.
Yeah, and once again, like I don't have a lot of time right now. I am taking over more of the cooking, and stress is super high right now. When I went to the grocery store the other day, I bought all pre-cut veggies, and I was just like, I don't even care right now. This is what I need in my life. Like, this is fine. At least I'm getting in the vegetables, which is what matters most. And then I made like a chili, and I'm making a stir fry, and so I bought like a bag of already like frozen stir fry veggies that there's just like plain, already cut up that I can just put it in the pan there. And it's so super easy. The other thing is, yeah, if you do get bored, having like a handful of different combos of seasonings can go a really long way. Like, I'm a huge fan of Italian seasonings. And so, for a lot of like my chicken, once again, like, oh man, did I eat a lot of chicken, and I got real tired of it at various points in my life, and when we're really anti-chicken for periods of time. But marinating that in some olive oil, balsamic vinegar, some garlic powder, onion powder, Italian seasoning, like literally the seasoning called Italian seasoning, and just like letting that marinate for 1 to 24 hours and then putting that in the oven. So good and so flavorful, and that's like a pretty big staple. And I usually have a staple of like some sort of Italian-based seasoning meal, usually once a week. That's pretty common in like our repertoire of food. Also like I love Asian food, coconut aminos with some of like the Asian style spices. The man, I'm gonna butcher these, and I don't remember one of the names. Like five, uh, it's like Chinese five-star seasoning. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay.
I
I
know what
don't
you're
remember
talking.
the.
Yeah, I do. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
5-star seasoning.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. It's strong, by the way, so you only need a little bit. I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but Zatar, Z-A, it's like apostrophe T-A-R. That's another really good one that I really like. With you can also put like some ginger in a lot of those, and that tastes super yummy, whether that's a seasoning or I like to buy the paste, the little ginger paste. That's super yummy. And once again, like super easy. You don't have to cut up ginger, ground up the ginger. Like that's a lot of work. So, having that as staples, some sort of like I have a taco seasoning, my own taco seasoning. I was AIP for a while, and this is like a version of an AIP taco seasoning that I found that I've since added a few other things to it now that I'm no longer AIP, including smoked paprika, which if you've never had smoked paprika, that is like one of my all-time favorite seasonings. Just like it's not spicy, but it adds like a really, really, really nice flavor. We go through that bottles of that pretty quick. But I batch make my own taco seasoning, and I'll put that in any sort of ground meat, whether it's going in like a taco or whatever it is. But even just that seasoning is super good, especially on some sort of ground meat, and or like a crock pot style, like shredded kind of meat. That's also really good.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We have a couple good like bulk meals that we will do. Like a beef chuck roast in the crock pot that cooks for like 6 or 7 hours. In this way, like I can make something in bulk. And I've been on the same page too with the frozen veggies just because we've been busy lately and like I need quick things. And I think that's something in this health space specifically, and because we had a lot of training in the nutrition area. And I know that it's really great when you can make everything from scratch, but we don't always have time to do that when it comes to like seasonings, dressings, even like at one point I was doing gluten-free sourdough bread and I loved it. I loved every second of it. But then my life got really busy and I just didn't have time to do it anymore. And it's like if you have time to do those things, that is amazing. That's great. I think it's a good goal to work towards if you have the time, because that way you're getting the freshest, best food in. But there's no reason that we need to be shaming ourselves for doing things that work better for our schedule, like buying frozen veggies, cooking food in bulk. We wanted to talk about histamine issues a little bit here just because we definitely work with a lot of clients who have histamine sensitivities, and there are some things that we can do to help diet wise without making this like crazy restrictive. It's very rare that we put someone on a low histamine diet, but we'll do what we can to avoid that. Some people absolutely need it, but for the most part, there's some pretty simple things that we can do, like anything cooked for a long period of time, we say low and slow, is going to be higher in histamine. So we want to avoid that if we have major like mast cell or histamine issues. And a way that we could do that is cooking our meat directly from like being frozen. That is a way to reduce the histamine in the food. Another thing we can do if you do want to batch prep or meal prep is that right after you make the food, just take enough out for like a day or two and then put the rest in the freezer like in individual servings so you can just pull it out and reheat it. That is another really great way to reduce the histamine amount in food.
Yeah, and for reference, as food sits in the fridge, whether it is fresh or cooked, it grows histamine the longer it sits, which is why, if you're buying fresh meat, like buy it if you're not going to cook it that day or first thing the next day, put it right in the freezer. You can also buy meat directly from frozen, and certain if you subscribe to any sort of like Butcher Box or any subscription type services, a lot of that meat will already be frozen, in which case, that makes it even easier. You can just cook it right from frozen. Probably don't want to use the crock pot a whole lot. And then, yeah, get your storage containers or glass storage containers, portion everything out, and then stick it right in the freezer after it's done cooking because that will limit the histamine that is growing and limit just your reactions to it. And then you can either just pull it out the night before you're about to eat it, in which case, look, like it's gonna have some histamine on it and it'll be a lot lower, and the likelihood of you having a significant reaction goes down quite a bit.
Yeah. And this just tends to be, because everyone has different needs, especially if you are someone who's dealing with like maybe you're going through some detox stuff right now and you do have higher histamine levels. In addition to everything that we just said, generally you're going to want to stay away from things like fermented foods, bone broth, anything that's been like sitting in the fridge for a couple days, like Megan said, any like slow cooked things. Not the best idea if you have a very, very high histamine intolerance. Like again, most people that we work with, fortunately, we don't have to do low histamine diets with them, but sometimes it is necessary and we can see the benefits from it. So just something to keep in mind, especially if you are like venturing into, maybe you're brand new to cooking, you do have a lot of issues going on. We just wanted to make a note on that.
Yeah, and I think if you are new to cooking, I think one of the biggest fears or hesitations around cooking that I've seen, and we've certainly had quite a few people over the years, and even more as a personal trainer, just just being so scared to cook food, particularly meat. And of all the gadgets that you can get, and I'm a big gadget person, just by the way, it just makes life so much easier. And none of these are terribly expensive. A meat thermometer is number one. If you are new to cooking, get a meat thermometer. It is your best friend. And that way, you have no fear of undercooking or overcooking your food. So it's not going to be like burnt or dried out and gross, and you're not going to like not want to eat it. You'll know exactly what temperature you need to get it to, and you can test to see exactly when things are done. That alone just goes such a long way. And you can Google search, by the way, just a quick, what temp should chicken be? What temp should ground beef be? Things like that. Just the meat thermometer takes all the guesswork out of it. And all you have to do is just put it in there, wait a couple seconds, and then it's going to tell you exactly how hot it is. And then you'll know exactly if it's done or if it needs to cook more. I'll also say I don't have my Instapot with me, but man, do I love an Instapot. It's the best. So good for rice, so good for like steamed veggies, makes it so easy. You can do one pot meals in an Instapot. You can do just even meat tastes really good, especially you can cook in something that would cook like, 6 to 8 hours in a crock pot. You can make in like an hour in the Instapot, and it's going to taste very, very, very similar. You can cook chicken, you can cook a fish, you can cook all kinds of stuff in there really quite quickly. And there's so many different recipes. I mean, the amount of recipes for an Instapot is insane, and it's so good. I'm also a huge fan of one pot meals, one pan meals, whenever I can get away with it, that has good protein, good veggies, and a little bit of a starch, or maybe the starch is, layered on top of that or something. And the Instapot makes that really easy. There's so many recipes that you can make in the Instapot that are just like one pot meals that are super good and super easy. So that's like one of my favorites. The crock pot, it's like really hard. I mean, I'm telling you, like it's really hard to mess up something in a crock pot.
Yeah.
So, like there's a learning curve
Yeah.
to a lot of things. A crock pot is not one of them. You really can just like put it in there. You need liquid in there. That's like the only caveat. You just need some liquid in there, and then you're pretty much good to go. You can season it however you want. You can not season it and season it after the fact, and it's probably still going to taste good. Any sort of like roasty type meat, especially like beef. I'm a big chuck roast kind of person. If you're a pork eater, like a pork shoulder, pork butt, super good. You can put chicken breast, chicken thighs in there, all kinds of stuff, and it's going to retain the moisture, so it's not going to get dried out, which is once again like another really big benefit. If you don't feel super comfortable cooking meat, crock pot super easy. I also have one of those like chopper things for your veggies. I just like I would love to take a cooking class. Shannon has way more experience cooking than I do, and I can get away with chopping vegetables and it's fine. And it takes me a while and I know I'm not doing it right and I like have judgment upon myself. So I just use that chopper, especially for like onions and peppers are like the two biggest things I use it for. So easy, makes it so simple. You just cut like these large chunks and then just mash them in there. You can make like zucchini noodles in there. I mean, like, and I have one of the higher tech ones, which I think was $30, by the way. And it came with like 12 or 15 different attachments. And you can, I mean, I've only used two of like all of the things that it comes with because that's all I really need it for, or have ventured to use. And it's phenomenal.
Yes, no, no shame in using cooking tools. I mean, I love cooking if I have the time and the space to do it. Like I can get real crazy in the kitchen just because I like to like it's like art to me, like coming up with different recipes and ideas and like what can I present it like. But that's like I feel like you got to be pretty into cooking to get down to that part. But I mean, I still use cooking tools myself, especially if I'm don't have a lot of time on my hand. Like there's no shame in that at all. I will say as far as like a safety standpoint, it is important, like if you are a person who's planning on getting into cooking and you like want to make this a normal part of your life, I would suggest investing in a good set of knives purely from like a safety standpoint. I mean, if you don't have sharp knives, you're going to try and cut things like with harder effort. It's easier to cut yourself. So it is important to have a decent set of knives if you plan on like being in the kitchen regularly, or like Megan said, like one of the veggie choppers that can come in handy as well. There's tons of other kitchen tools out there. I mean, I could go on a whole kitchen tool thing, but we don't need to do that. I did want to mention one thing when we talk about like non-toxic kitchen items here. So it is very common to there's like this plastic bag insert for the crock pot that I see advertised quite often. It's a way to basically make it so like you don't have to clean your crock pot out. I highly suggest not using that piece and just cooking in the actual crock pot itself. Yes, it might take like 5 minutes longer to clean, but as far as like a non-toxic standpoint, like we really don't want to be cooking in plastic items. We want to stay away from that as much as we can. And that even goes for like putting hot food into plastic containers. Eventually, switching out your plastic stuff for glassware is just going to be such a better option for our bodies, especially from a non-toxic standpoint.
Yeah, and reheating food, make sure it's not in plastic. You're getting all the plastics, and anytime plastic is heated up, you're gonna start ingesting some of that. So if you can just avoid that overall, that's really great. Same thing if honestly, the crock pot, I've never used one of the the covers for the crock pot. And it's not, and look, like I hate cleaning. I like to cook and I hate to clean. You're fine. It's real, like I promise it's not hard to clean a crock pot, especially if you can like once you pull whatever you're cooking in it, once you pull that out, dump the juices, put it in the sink, and it's gonna, I mean, it's everything's gonna wipe right off and it's gonna be so easy to clean. Now, if you let it sit for a while, yes, things will get stuck on the side and on the top and might take a few extra minutes to clean. But if you're on top of it, same thing with the Instapot. The Instapot is so easy to clean. It's stainless steel, by the way, so like super great, super clean. Don't get it. I don't know if there are covers for that, but don't use those. And that's also really, really easy to clean. And if you're baking, instead of baking right on the sheet, once again, like for cleaning purposes, unbleached parchment paper is definitely the way to go. Sometimes it is hard to find that in grocery stores or wherever you're buying stuff. I know I ran out and I ended up having to get bleached parchment paper versus unbleached, which not my favorite. I just got a little bit of thing until I could get it from Amazon, where it was like a true unbleached parchment paper, which is definitely preferred. And you do want to limit aluminum foil as much as possible. Aluminum toxicity, look, is super, super common. Aluminum is one of the metals heavy metals that we're exposed to the most, especially if you have not started to switch out any of your body care, skin care, deodorant, like any of that kind of stuff, the likelihood that you're getting a lot of aluminum is pretty darn high. It's also in some over-the-counter medications, specifically allergy medications. The generic versions almost all have aluminum in them. So it's really common to end up with an aluminum issue overload. And I'll say, like, I fell into that category really hardcore. My aluminum levels were literally off of the charts. So anything you can do to limit it, and it's, I still use it every once in a while for some grilling because the parchment paper doesn't like wrap itself quite as well, but it's pretty rare. And usually I'm just using the unbleached parchment paper or nothing as needed.
Yeah, and sometimes like if I'm going on vacation, staying at an Airbnb or a rental or something, like sometimes we don't always have the option to use these things unless you're bringing it with you. But it's more like if you're doing this on a daily basis, like it might be something to consider swapping out. And same thing with your cookware. If you're looking to switch to more non-toxic stuff, like the stainless steel options are going to be great. Anything that's like ceramic or even cast iron. I will say with the cast iron, you might want to know what your iron levels are before if you're someone who wants to use it like every day, every once in a while, not a huge deal, but if you do want to use it every day, that is something to consider because we are getting some iron sourcing from that. But in general, ceramic coated stainless steel cookware is going to be some of the more safer options for our body. Again, the Teflon non-stick stuff, some of the aluminum pans, like those are just exposing us to more chemicals, more heavy metals. So the less exposure to that, the better.
Yeah, and if you are looking to swap your cookware, I'm a big fan of the ceramic. It is a little bit easier going from some of the more traditional non-stick to ceramic than it is to one of the other options. There is definitely a learning curve with the stainless steel. Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar, like go watch some videos. Kelly's Clean Kitchen, who she's on Instagram, and if you are on our email list, I do share recipes for every newsletter that goes out, and they are recipes that I have personally used and enjoyed, and a lot of times I'm making tweaks to those to customize them a little bit, and I share all of that. So if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, go to our website, trifectacollective.net, and subscribe to that because I do like usually we send them out twice a month. This month has been a little bit of an exception with some of the stuff going on, but usually it's twice a month and we share like a super great recipe. So definitely go sign up for that. But yeah, Kelly's Clean Kitchen has a really good like how-to video of how to properly prepare your stainless steel pans for cooking that I have found really helpful. So you guys might too. But yeah, ceramic is definitely it's a little heavier. Be careful because the whole thing does get hot oftentimes. So you might need, like a towel or a pot holder or something you have to get used to cooking with that. So those are some things to think about. I'm also a big fan of, like wooden um cook like cooking utensils as an alternative to like plastic. Obviously, you don't want the plastic ones on there. The stainless steel ones are also great. Don't use those if you are using some of the non-stick stuff because that's going to make everything even worse. But for me, like we almost exclusively use wood. Wood's pretty across the board for all the things that we have.
Yeah, and just a couple other tips here too. Like generally, yeah, staying away from plastic is going to be your best option when we're dealing with like any sort of heat. The wood utensils, whatnot, those are great. Silicone ones can also be helpful. So if you have like a nice ceramic pan, generally you don't want to use any type of metal on there. So you would have to use like a silicone or a wood just because you risk it like chipping and scratching the pan. So just a couple other good tips when it comes to cooking. And I don't have any particular like people off the top of my head, but for the knife skills, like if you did get a good knife set and you wanted to learn more about knife skills, I'm sure you could certainly YouTube like, basics of how to use different kinds of knives because there's different ones. And that would also be a good starting point just to get some education. Again, like safety is a big thing here when you invest in good knives, like they are going to be sharper, and it's important to know how to use them properly.
For sure. And like we have to sharpen our knives right now, and I get so far. I'm like, I'm definitely gonna cut myself because our knives are dull right now. I'm like, I can't. I tried to cut an onion the other day, and I just looked at my partner. I was like, babe, I really need you to find the knife sharpener because I'm like I'm like haphazardly trying to cut this onion, and nothing is happening. And I'm like, this is dangerous. I'm already prone to accidents and making a mess. Like something's definitely gonna happen if we don't sharpen these knives here soon.
Yeah, and it gives you more like anxiety when you're in the kitchen as well, because obviously no one wants to hurt themselves. There's a pretty decent brand of knives. I believe it's called a Henkel that you can get on Amazon, and it's very good price range. Like I would say anywhere between like $20 to $40, and it's great quality knives. They're all like stainless steel. They last a really long time. So if you are looking for to upgrade your knife set, that would be one to check out.
Yeah, and just a couple other brands to mention from like a cookware perspective. Green Pan and Caraway do tend to have some pretty good quality pots and pans and things like that. So those are some options if, and there is a little bit of a price difference. I will say, you know, especially with cookware, usually the more expensive, the better quality, the longer it's going to last versus, an initial cheaper upfront price may not be quite as good or may not last as long. And I will say, like, typically, I think I'm going to get this right. I'm maybe flip-flopping it. I think Green Pan's a little bit cheaper than Caraway, but those pans definitely don't last as long. Like you're looking at like 1.5, 2 years from my experience with Green Pan versus Caraway's going to last a few more than that. But there is a price difference between these two. So just an FYI about that. So like when you are looking to swap and upgrade, and don't obviously like as we talk about low tox anything, don't try and like swap everything all at once. Like you can easily spend a small fortune trying to do all of this. It's like do one thing at a time. If you're getting ready to swap your cookware, the pan you use the most, get a better version of that one first and start there. And then you can kind of slowly as you need to replace things or have extra, financial finances, then you can start to switch out then. But definitely don't try and do with this all at once because yeah, you can easily spend a small fortune trying to swap everything all at once.
Oh, okay. I thought I lost you for a second. But yes, and if you have the opportunity, this is so it's funny. My aunt used to do this every year when she was younger. Like for Christmas, she would ask her parents to buy her like a new, like nice updated like pot or a pan. And that's a really good way to, for birthdays, holidays, if you're getting married. I just had my bridal shower this past weekend and I asked for like all new cookware. So those are also really great opportunities to update things in your kitchen and get some of this like nicer stuff and not feel like what Megan was saying, like you have to spend a small fortune on all of this. Like it's a slow process. Like I said, birthdays, holidays, that is also a good time to ask for some of this stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to like meal planning, meal prepping here a little bit. And the resource that we're going to share in the show notes is called A Simple Guide to Better Nutrition. And it's basically like how to build meals, and it looks at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and different arenas like this. And really, it's like picking one from each category. The instructions are pretty darn clear on this resource and pretty great. And this is something that I used for a long time, just by the way. In looking at building my meals, once again, like my bodybuilding experience, that really shaped how I like meal plan and meal prep. It does largely look different because my partner's not gets real tired of food pretty quick. So we still do bigger meals, but I'm the one eating a lot of the leftovers for longer because I can eat the same thing every day and be like totally fine for the vast majority of the week. But we will share that resource. But like thinking about breakfast, I feel like breakfast is a really commonly tough one, and so I want to go through just like a couple, maybe like some different options of breakfast things that we'll often cook, or what do our breakfasts kind of look like, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so breakfast has always been a challenging one for me because that is something I do get tired of eating. And I do meal prep my breakfast to last throughout the week. So recently we just changed it up to making breakfast burritos. And the simplest way that I have found to do this is because we tend to eat higher protein. We use like a lot of eggs here. We'll also add in some other sort of breakfast meat just to like up the protein. And so we have to use like, not 2 dozen eggs when we're trying to prep breakfast for the week. But we'll usually make a mix of like scrambled eggs. We'll add like, maybe some shredded chicken in. We'll add spinach, tomatoes, kind of whatever veggies we feel like using. And we'll actually lay down a piece of parchment paper and just, it forms into the square and we'll just bake that for like 15 minutes at 350. And I just cut it into rectangles and stack it up and add some like goat cheese. That's what I use, or sheep's milk cheese. And I use my cassava flour tortillas, and I'll just make like a little breakfast burrito out of them. And it's really nice change as opposed to doing like scrambled eggs every day or, sunny side up eggs, which are also a great option. Another thing that we will do is prep like a breakfast quiche. Sometimes we'll do like a crustless quiche, or I'll put potatoes on the bottom, or I might prep the potatoes ahead of time. So just do like diced potatoes with seasonings roasted in the oven. Maybe we'll prep some bacon on the side, and then I'll do just some type of like egg crustless quiche with veggies and cheese in it. And that's another really easy thing to do that I just take out of the fridge in the morning, grab a slice and heat everything up. Those are our like staples that we have been rotating recently.
Yeah, so we have quite a few staples. I love breakfast so much. And I'll also say eggs are a little hit or miss for me. Eggs is probably one of the few things that I can get tired of. So I just need to be mindful of how, like the frequency of the eggs. Also, if I eat a lot of eggs, if I'm eating them like every single day for breakfast, I do notice some changes in my skin. And I used to have like a pretty significant reaction to eggs, so eggs were not in my diet for a long time. I do find now, as long as it's not an everyday kind of thing. So, kind of like our staples, I like a good yogurt. So, Siggi's coconut-based yogurt, which is higher in protein. If you can find it, like, man, is that so good. Just their unsweetened plain one. Stack that with a scoop of Equip's beef protein isolate, unflavored, usually some berries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, whatever it is, but I'm a big berry person. Put some hemp hearts in there and a little bit of gluten-free granola and just mix that up. You're getting like 25 to 35 grams of protein pretty easily with that. And it's good, simple, easy. You can also make that the night before. I'll also say I'm not a smoothie person. I like to chew my food. I like to eat real food, and that does make a big difference for me. If I drink a smoothie, it's gonna go through me pretty quick, and I'm gonna be hungry about an hour to an hour and a half later, even if it's high in protein. So that's a struggle for me. Also like a breakfast scramble. This is like a huge staple for me. Like a bunch of now. Also, when I meal prep, I like, make a meal for 10 people kind of thing. So it's like a bunch of chicken sausage, some sweet potatoes, spinach, apples, very like warm spices. I do like a poultry seasoning and an allspice in there. I do make a homemade pumpkin spice in batch stew, and I'll put some of that on there. Put some bacon on top, like, man, super yummy. And you spend an hour making that one day, and I mean, literally, it's 6 days worth of meals for two people. My partner will also make a homemade apple oatmeal, which like has been a huge winter staple and so good. It also smells so good because he's like roasting the apples first, and we'll put like cinnamon and pumpkin spice and ginger on there, and then gluten-free oats. We'll put a scoop of, I actually like Organifi's vanilla protein powder in that one. Just a little hint of vanilla in there, mixed in with the oatmeal, just like super, super good. I also like some chicken sausage with like an egg or two, either scrambled or over medium with a piece of toasted gluten-free bread, put it on there. I love bacon any chance we can get it. And my cholesterol, by the way, like for the amount of bacon that I eat, my cholesterol is still like super, super good. Almost, I have a history of low cholesterol, and it's not low, but it's like pretty low. It was 163 was my total cholesterol when I ran it last year. So, like for real, guys, dietary fat does not impact your cholesterol measures, markers. There is a very, 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 very small percentage of people who don't respond well to saturated fats, but that's never tested. It's called lipoprotein little a. We talked about it, I think, in our blood testing, one of our blood testing episodes. So it's not the majority of people, just by the way. It's usually the sugars and the starches and the processed foods that's a bigger contributor here. So yeah, those are like my big and favorite breakfast items. But I get so excited for breakfast every day. Like when we wake up, one of the first things I'm like, what do you want for breakfast today? And I'm like so excited to just eat breakfast. Lunch is like my meh meal, but breakfast is like I love breakfast.
Yeah, I am a big breakfast person too. That's one of the things that I am the main cook in the house. My partner works longer hours than I do, and also like cooking and being in the kitchen is not his favorite things. So to give myself a break, we typically do like go out to breakfast, maybe once or twice a month. Like, and I love breakfast, brunch foods. That's always my favorite. Another really great thing, I love a good avocado toast with like eggs and bacon and tomatoes. Sometimes we'll do like microgreens on there if we can get them at the farmer's market. That's another pretty that's not the best thing to meal prep because those things don't sit well, but it is a fairly easy breakfast to make in the morning and it's very, very tasty. You're getting a lot of good fats in there, a lot of good fuel for the day, so that's another staple.
Yeah, yeah, super good. And I also like sometimes, this morning I was on my own for breakfast and I had two lengths of chicken sausage and I had a little piece of my gluten-free bread toasted and I put some like not homemade, but I got them at a local place, so they feel homemade. Like strawberry preserves on there, and they're like, I mean, super clean. Even like there is a little bit of sugar in there, but it's from I think it's coconut sugar. So it's like a cleaner version, and just like a little bit of a spread on there. Ah, man, I forgot how good that is. And I mean, that literally took me not even 5 minutes, to maybe 5 minutes with the toast, to do all of that. And it was so easy, super good, kept me super full. So yeah, the protein piece for breakfast, it's really like what is your protein source going to be and how can we get at least 20 grams. I'll say if you can get closer to 30 or 40 grams to start your day, man, that's going to set you up for a lot of success for blood sugar regulation, energy, cognition, focus. If you have any sort of like cortisol issues, hormone imbalances, it's really, really, really going to help with that. So breakfast is huge. And if you're often not hungry in the morning for breakfast, that's usually a sign of a cortisol dysregulation issue. I can tell when some of my cortisol stuff is coming back when I'm not hungry for breakfast. That's like my one of my very first signs. I'm like, oh, appetite is dropping, particularly in the morning. Like this is from stress, this is from cortisol. I'm still going to eat breakfast. I'm still going to try and get in my normal breakfast. And it might be a little bit of a little extra effort to do that.
Yeah, that same for me. I can always see when things are stress is getting a little bit higher. It's when my appetite starts to change. Maybe not sleeping is good. So, yeah, getting starting your day with a protein rich breakfast, it just totally makes a difference for like the energy levels throughout the day. Like we were saying, blood sugar regulation. So many benefits to this, and I want to add like another important piece here, and that's connecting with like your food, kind of setting intentions around it. I do think that's an important piece because that often just makes the whole experience more joyful. Like when we are rushing around trying to find food to eat, just to make sure we get something in our system, there's a big disconnect there. And that's also one of the main points of meal prepping for myself is that it allows me to slow down and to like savor the moment, take more time. I mean, with everything, like you were saying, about your jam, like it's made locally, it's made with coconut sugar. When we can start to connect with those little pieces, it's actually relaxing our system. We're going to digest our food better. There's so many benefits to just like slowing down around mealtime. Unfortunately, that's what meal prepping allows us to do is we can be less rushed in that time frame. And that also goes into planning out the food you're going to eat before you start to prep and whatnot. Like it's very important, I think, to take the time and sit down and say like, hey, what do I want to eat this week? What are we going to have for breakfast? Because then when we get to the grocery store, right then and there, it's going to be a less stressful experience. We're not like, I don't know what I want to do. What do I want to eat? Is my mind very frantic? Because it's so easy to get caught up in that when we're at the grocery store. So just actually taking the time to like sit down and plan out, what do I need to get? When am I going to cook it? It just makes the entire experience way less stressful.
Yeah, and that's really important. And two things I wanted to mention. First going back to breakfast, then I just want to expand upon what you just talked about. Breakfast, by the way, also doesn't have to be quote unquote breakfast eat. You can have leftovers for dinner. I mean, breakfast doesn't have to be like eggs or sausage or bacon, or any of these things. Like breakfast can be anything. It can be leftovers from dinner. It can be like, what we'd consider like a normal lunch or a normal dinner or whatever like that. So it doesn't have to like, don't feel pressure to be like, I don't like breakfast food and I don't like breakfast and that's why I don't eat it. And those are my only options at breakfast. Like, but no, there's no restriction. You can have anything for any meal at any point in time. You can have breakfast for dinner, breakfast for lunch, like mix and match, like all of that stuff is totally fine. There's no rules saying you have to have certain foods at breakfast. No, that totally not the case. The other thing is, so my partner and I do like a quote unquote a business meeting once or twice a week. And one of the things that we always do is we talk about food for the following week, and we'll usually pick like three meals that we're gonna have, knowing that when we cook, we're gonna get at least two meals out of that. And then for him, he's big on like, especially right now, his appetite's a little weird. He's big on wraps for lunch, so we make sure we have stuff for that. I'm no, thank you. For me, so I like for me typically I really like a chicken salad. There's like a healthier chicken salad that I really like, and I can portion out my chicken and then make this little mix that I really like. Sometimes it is just leftovers. Like today, I made chili last night, and so I had leftover chili for lunch, knowing that something else was being made for dinner. I'll also really like, especially in the summer, and like it's already summer here, is a good salad. And you can batch make that. And so I'll do my favorite salad of all time. And this is two-thirds of the time, this is the kind of salad I'm having. It's an arugula base. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of kale now, but usually it's arugula. I roast some sweet potatoes and beets, put it on there. Usually it's chicken on there. Occasionally I'll use like a beef, some sort of like shredded beef on there. But usually it's some sort of shredded chicken that I've made in a crock pot, whether it's breast or thighs. What else do I put in there? Dried cherries, maybe some tomatoes, little hit or miss on the tomatoes. I put some Kalamata olives in there, usually some sheep's milk feta cheese. And then I'll either do just olive oil and balsamic vinegar, or there's a little homemade dressing that I'll batch make that has olive oil, balsamic vinegar, some lemon, some garlic. I feel like there's something else in there that I can't remember. If you subscribe to the email list, I promise that will be a recipe coming pretty soon, probably in April coming up. So subscribe to that if you want the full recipe of that. I will put my list together. It's been almost a year since I've made it, or it's been out over 6 months since I've made it. So my memory is a little off, but I'll also say I've made that for a couple retreats that I've either led or supported in, and that has been a fan favorite. So that's a really good recipe, and it's so easy. You just like throw everything in a bowl and you're good. And you can throw everything in a bowl ahead of time too.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the salad thing. I actually was, for a long period of my life, I ate a lot of salads. And then when I got into like out of my restrictive dieting and all that stuff, I really veered away from salads. But over the last year, like during the summers, I'm starting to like play with mixing it up again. And there's a woman, I don't remember her name, that I follow on social media, and she does like steak salad Sundays, and she just does different variations every Sunday of a steak salad. And oh my gosh, she has got some good ones out there. So yeah, you can really get like it, once you get into cooking and get comfortable in the kitchen, my gosh, there is just like so many different things that you can try, and it becomes like fun when you have a little bit of extra time. And it's just the whole, like, I'm getting excited just talking about it because I love food and it just gives me so much joy. And I know for a lot of people, cooking can just be scary and fearful. And once we kind of break the barrier and get in there, there is a lot of joy surrounding it.
Yeah, and it can be really, once you learn some of the basics, it can become really fun. I got into cooking more when I started my restrictive dieting, just because I had to. You went from like not having literally no choice to be like, okay, you have like these 20 foods if you're really lucky that you can eat. Like, what are all the combinations that you can do with these foods? I also want to talk about recipes. Like there's a ton of resources, probably too many resources on recipes too. And so, I want to just talk about like how maybe we find recipes or people that we follow. I know I have a couple staple like people and recipe sites that I usually use. I'll say by and large, if I'm searching for some recipes, and by the way, I have a whole folder on my computer of just like recipes, so that I can go back to them. If I liked them, I delete them if they weren't good, but that's pretty rare. But yeah, so they all go like in a Google Doc that I use so that I have like all of these resources. And when I'm in a pinch, I can always just go back to those and be like, okay, this is what I feel like eating this week. So if I'm searching for a new recipe, I'm almost always going to search paleo, whatever it is I'm trying to make. Not that I'm strict paleo by any means, because I'm absolutely not. And that is going to give me gluten-free options. It's typically going to use better type of ingredients, better quality, not going to be filled with like, a heavy cream kind of thing or that kind of thing. So by and large, that's what I'm searching. A few sites I do like and use a lot. Nom Nom Paleo, literally N as in Nancy, O, M as in Mary, Nom Nom Paleo. I really like Paleo Running Mama. She is so good. I have made at least half, if not two-thirds of her recipes, and she has tons of them. Coconuts and kettlebells, she has some good ones. She doesn't have a ton, but some of the ones she does have are really, really good. Like some of her one pan, like sheet pan recipes, I've made those a whole bunch. And then Kelly's Clean Kitchen. She's a professional chef. She just came out with a new book all about potatoes, if you're a potato lover. And she's 100% gluten-free and dairy-free cook. Professional chef kind of cook. So like she's got some really, really good recipes. Once again, if you subscribe to our newsletter, the crispy parm chicken strips that she uses, oh my goodness. My partner was like, "Can you make this every week? Because these are so good." And he eats gluten. I mean, not a ton because we're together, but he eats gluten and he eats like more regular people food versus me. I'm a little bit more strict with my diet, but I mean, he fell in love with these. So that's a great resource, especially if you're cooking for people who are not super into like the healthiest, cleanest kind of recipes.
Yeah, those are all great ones by and large. Definitely some of the same ones that I use. And the only one that I'll add to it is there's a website called Real Food Dietitians. And I like them because they do have like gluten-free, dairy-free options. I will say is like a blanket statement across the board. Typically, when focusing on higher protein, you're going to start to notice like when you use recipes that you're going to maybe want to double the protein for a lot of these recipes just because we're not reaching that 25 to 40 grams given these regular recipes. So just something to think about. Like if you find something that you like, try it, see how it works out for you. And then I would consider like maybe making some changes for like the oil quality that you're using, or it becomes easier to make things like gluten-free if you find a regular recipe or dairy-free. Again, once you get more into it, the easier it's going to be to kind of make some of these changes and swaps. And then certainly, again, like doubling the protein. If you're focusing on eating higher protein, it's almost a given with like the majority of recipes, especially if you're trying to batch cook or meal prep because it's going to last you longer.
Yeah, and honestly, I'll say I usually even, depending on how many meals I'm trying to make this last, like tripling the protein on there is not uncommon at all. I'd say doubling is like the bare minimum, and depending on the size of the meal, I mean, like, especially from a starch perspective, if something is a little bit starchier, you're gonna want to triple the protein amount. I can almost guarantee for almost all of these recipes because it's not going to be enough, especially if you are cooking larger meals that you want to save. So, yeah, never hesitate. It is very rare that I follow a recipe now to the T. Usually I am tripling the protein. Usually I'm doubling the spice count too. That's another little secret is double the spice count for almost everything. And you can start to learn to manipulate that. Like I'm not a spicy food person, so even in some of my, like I have a pumpkin chili recipe that I love from Paleo Running Mama. I don't use, I like very, I don't I use the outline of her recipe, but my recipe is quite different at this point because I've cooked it so many times. But like I use about half of the chili powder that she recommends. I use double, sometimes triple the smoked paprika, and then double a lot of the other spices that are in there. Just because man, that spices are the name of the game. And if you want really good tasting food, spices play a massive, massive role here.
Yeah, they really do. And that's a way, once you get more familiar, like in the kitchen, that is a way to easily start to play around with food and just like making tweaks with like the spices and the different quantities of things. But generally, like again, if you're someone who's listening to this and you are just starting out in the kitchen, maybe follow the recipe the first couple times just to make it easier on yourself. And then once you start to get more into it, you can swap up like the things that we're talking about and kind of make them more specific to your liking.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So that's a pretty good overview and outline of like meal prepping and cooking and the basics of it. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered it all.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, hopefully that helps. We'll put the Simple Guide to Better Nutrition in the show notes. Maybe we'll put a links to some of the those recipe sites too, that we mentioned. And once again, I share my own recipes of all the things that I cook. Look on stories on Instagram too, because I will share. It's a little hit or miss that once again this month, but by and large, I usually share like a recipe once a week, once every other week, and then I'll share another one on in the email newsletter. So make sure you go subscribe to that. As always, like, follow, subscribe. If it resonates, 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.